Hello everybody. So this is another installment of the Focus ST engine build, and this time instead of balancing the pistons, which you already did in the last episode of the engine build, I guess, we're going to be balancing the rods this time. So pretty much the point of doing this, which a lot of people don't even know happens when you're building a performance engine, is you want everything regarding the rotational assembly to be as balanced as it can be. And basically what that does is it prevents any excessive vibrations in the engine while it's at high RPM or just in normal operation. So you want everything to be as balanced as it possibly can be, especially in a performance engine, because it's going to be pushed very hard. Yes, the components are stronger than factory materials, but at the same time they still have a limit, and you want to have everything to be as balanced as possible and just kind of be in its own harmony. So saying that, we are going to be balancing the rods, and it's not really something you can do without having what we have right here, which is the rod balancing kit. I believe I paid $190 for it, so it was about $200 after shipping. And yeah, it's kind of a it's one of those things with those purchases where you're like, the only reason I'm getting this is because I'm going to be tackling something like balancing rods myself, and the only reason I got it is because I plan on doing this for a career in the future. So it's good to have it now. I know there's different ways of doing it, but this is the way that I'm going to approach it. So the concept of balancing rods, I've had several people ask me, because people have been asking me, when's the engine going to be done, when's the engine going to be done. I was like, I have to balance the rods. I already balance pistons and gap rings and everything like that. So in regards to balancing the rods, this whole kit, you have to set it up pretty accurately to mimic the measurements that are already on the boxes. So this is rod number 4 in my hand, and I don't know if you can see, but at Manley, which is the brand of the rods, as you can see, Manley rods, basically they supply you with their measurement of the big end weight and then the pin end weight, which is up here. So go into detail about that. Big end, it's pretty self-explanatory. The big end of the rod, this one right here. Pin end is where the wrist pin that connects the piston to the rod goes into the rod, and that's going to be your pin end right here. And those two measurements are two different weights of the individual big and pin end, and this is the tool that you need to use to get that measurement. So I already went ahead and ahead of time measured all of the rods just to double check that they were accurate in comparison to the boxes, and I got spot on measurements for all of them. Yes, it does take some tinkering, and I can see why people leave this to the professionals to do this. It's just because setting this up personally, it seemed pretty self-explanatory. It seemed simple. You just set I'm gonna turn this off, but you just set the rod on here to set it up. So this is the rod that you're gonna be balancing essentially, and everything you're looking for is for this to be level. So I have a level right here that fits perfectly in the H beam, and that right there is level. And this pendulum area right here has to be parallel with this post, and there's a lot of, I guess, little factors that come into play when you're actually getting measurements that make it really difficult to get repeatable measurements, at least for me. So I don't know if I am doing something wrong with this, but I have been able to get repeatable measurements of these boxes, but it just took a little bit of tinkering, just repetitive measurements. I've literally been sitting here for over an hour just trying to get 4 rods measured out to what the boxes were saying, and I got repeatable measurements for those, so I'm going to stick with those. So when it comes to balancing them, as you can see, they are different. The 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all different measurements. So you have 415.8, 413.7, 414.5, and 415.3, and this is all in grams. So just like the pistons, Everything's going to be weighed in grams, and just like the pistons as well, we're going to be balancing them to get them as close as possible to each other when it comes to big end and small end. So this is just big ends. These measurements are just big end weight. When you start measuring the pin ends, that's when you have to most likely change your setup with this whole kit here. So instead of measuring the big end weight, which is where the scale is right here, you just think vice versa, flip it over, take this, I don't even know what to call this, I guess a spacer, put it on the pendulum, and then flip the rod and measure it this way. And that will give you your pin end weight. Now, when it comes to this platform over here that I'm putting the spacer back on, when you're measuring the weights, it cannot move. Just because, say you weigh one big end or one small end of the rod, take it off, and then it moves. When you go to measure another one, it won't be in the same exact scenario, so you won't get an accurate measurement, which is why this is very touchy and very tinkery, because you have to find that perfect balance between, you know, being able to actually use the tool and keep repeatedly using it without messing anything up. So that's one of the reasons why I've been having such a hard time finding repeatable measurements. And you know, I guess it is what it is. Like I said, I feel like that's why they leave it to professionals to do this type of thing, but I'm taking it upon myself. So hopefully anybody out there that's taking it upon themselves, hopefully this is helpful, hopefully understand what I'm going through. But back to them being different weights. So just like the pistons, we have to remove material from something. So the lightest piston being, the lightest rod being rod number 2 for big end side of things. This is going to be our baseline. So we have to match all the other rods for the big ends of the rods to this one. So piston number 2. We won't touch piston, or I keep saying piston. We won't touch rod number 2 just because that is the baseline. But every other rod will have to be balanced, and we will have to remove material, and that's why we have this here. Now, typically at a machine shop they have a large one that, you know, is it'll remove a lot of material very easily. But with this is pretty much all we have, and we're just going to give it a shot. But essentially, when you're removing material, like we'll turn this belt sander on and just grind the I guess the big end bosses where the actual rod bolts go into, and just do that for both sides evenly, just like with the pistons. You got to do everything evenly, because if you remove material from this side's going to be heavier. That's just the common sense. So after we're done measuring everything when it comes to the big ends, we move to the pin ends. And when it comes to removing material from the pin ends, you want to roll it on the top of the rod, just removing material slowly. That way, just like with the pistons. I don't know if anybody watched the piston videos, but it's exactly the same. You just kind of go slowly until you reach the measurement that you're satisfied with. Now with this, considering the fact that it is very difficult to get repeatable measurements, I'm just going to be going by the 1/10 of a gram, which is satisfactory in my terms, just because it's going to be very difficult to be able to balance everything out to the 100th of a gram or 1,000th of a gram. It's very frustrating. So yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, start by removing material from rods 1, 3, and 4, and I'll catch up with you guys when I've kind of, you know, started working towards that. I'll probably do some off camera just to kind of get an idea of what I'm doing, because this is my first time doing this. So yeah, I'll get back to you guys when I'm ready to update you guys. Alright, so I already went ahead and balanced one of the rods off camera, at least the big end of the rod off camera. And I balanced rod number 4, and that one was starting at, I think it was one of the highest measurements that we had. So rod 4 was at 415.3 grams, and then I got it down to 413.7. So the one that I have right now is going to be rod number 3. And that one right now is measured at 414.5, and I just double checked it right now. So I'm basically just gonna show you the technique that I'm using to remove material from the big end, and then just show you, the process of slowly going like back and forth between measuring, taking the rod off, measuring, taking the rod off, and just kind of show you, I guess, step by step of how to do it. So it gets a little loud for a second. Let's see. And like I said before, you want to go evenly. Try to, remove material evenly from either side. And yeah, you'll get that. So now, it hurts to scuff them up. It really does, like internally, like it's really cringy at first, but after you keep doing it, especially with the pistons too, after you've done it and you're just like, oh well, just send it. But we're gonna put it on here. It started at 414.5. Let's see if we can get a repeatable measurement. If not, then I'm gonna have to sit here for a minute. It's higher than what we started at. So this is gonna give you an idea of what I have to deal with. So we're at 413, that's obviously lower. That's 413.75, which is actually where we want to be. But I'm just gonna tap it a little bit. And it's, what did we start at? This is exactly what we started at, 414.5, 414.27. So as you can see, it's very difficult. That's not what the measurement that we have right now, because we obviously remove material. And it's a little frustrating when you're doing all this stuff and you're expecting to have accurate measurements, but it's like hit or miss. So I'll just sit here just like I did with the other one, and just keep kind of playing with it until I'm satisfied and I get a solid repeatable measurement that I can verify on paper. So yeah, that's how you do that. And then I guess I'll get back to you guys when we're doing the pin ends, because that's kind of basically all you have to do for the big ends. You just got to play with it and just try to balance it out. It's literally a balancing act. It just takes time. I have gone through and I have done all the big ends. So now we're going to right here. I kind of screwed up. This was supposed to be the original pin end measurements, but I started writing the after measurements, the big end finals. I just started writing them down here, but they all evened out to exactly the same. So now we're gonna move on to the pin ends. So I'm gonna get the pin end measurements and then go from there. But just to show you guys how to do that, you basically just take this guy, put it on this guy.
And be careful not to budge that, because you want it to stay as level as even as possible.
So what's gonna happen is it's gonna be exactly the opposite, but considering the fact that we did change the spacer, you want to check the level of everything, and right there it's off, so this is not level. And with this kit you actually have the ability to adjust that. So what you're gonna need to do is loosen this and then kind of work with it until it reaches a level point. And this is part of that setup that I said was a little bit involved, but with time, just patience and a keen eye, you'll be able to get it all set up. And that's if you want to, tackle this yourself, or if you want to just have the professionals do it. But sometimes you just want to do things yourself. And that's level. Now you check the pendulum, make sure it's parallel with the post, which it is, and then you can start measuring your pin ends. So what you do is you turn on the scale, just as before, and then you go about measuring this. And it's at 174 and it's supposed to be at 176, so I may have some more tinkering to do, but I'm gonna try to replicate that as best as I can and see if I can get that as a reoccurring measurement, so that way we can have a solid start, and then from there we remove material from the pin end, and at the end that'll be it, and it'll be all done. So yeah, working on it, and we're just gonna keep going, and then I'll show you how I remove material from the pin end once I get to that. Alright, so I went ahead and I measured all of the pin ends of all the rods, and I noted them down. They were exact for what the boxes said on them, so everything was good there. Now I just have to match the lightest end, the lightest pin end, which was rod number 1. I keep wanting to say piston, but it was rod number 1 at 176.5 grams. So we're gonna try to match. It's not gonna be too much actual removal of any material, but we still have to, balance it out and match that rod number 1.
Of a gram.
Yeah. So I mean, and then the rod number 4, which this is it right here in my hand. This is gonna be the most material we have to remove from any of the rods. So I'm just gonna get on and show you guys how to do this. Considering the fact that this is the rod we're going to be removing the most material from the pin end, I'm going to start with this one just because, it'd be good to show you guys the technique with the one that needs more instead of something that I just need to graze slightly. So same concept as the big end, how we did this and that on both sides, but instead we're going to be grinding this surface here. You don't want to do too much, you just want to, gradually roll it on the pin end. After that, we'll see where we stand in regards to the weight. We shouldn't have removed a lot of material with that, but it's always just good to double check everything. It's better to remove a little bit of material and then have to remove more after than to remove too much. But yeah, I'll get back to you guys when I have all this stuff dialed in. Alrighty, so we have actually came to the end of our balancing journey here. So all the pin ends finals were all the same, and all the big end finals were all the same. So at this point, those are set. Pistons are good. The rings are gapped. Now from here on out, we just gotta assemble everything, get all the final bearing clearances for the main bearings and the rod bearings, make sure everything's good to go. And we'll do a video on that too. And then I recently got, where did I put it? I recently got the piston ring compressor. It's made by Wiseco, and it's made for my specific bore, 87.5 millimeters. So I needed this to be able to actually assemble the engine. I got that, so we're ready for that. So once we put all the rings on the pistons, we'll be able to actually compress them and put the pistons and rod assembly into the block. And that's when we can test our rod bearing clearance. So yeah, from here on out, it's just, assembly, because we've done all of our balancing, which was probably the most stressful part for me, just because we were dealing with a lot of expensive materials. And yeah, it might be a little bit boring, but I figured might as well show the whole process of what goes into building a performance engine. So I mean, as much as I really didn't like doing that, just because it was very time consuming and I was standing here for a long time. It took hours, literally hours of just standing here doing the same thing over and over again, just remeasuring. But I can already tell it's going to be worth it in the end. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new about what goes into balancing pistons, rods, and, gapping rings and stuff like that. Hopefully you learned something. And if you're curious to see any of our other builds, just follow us on Instagram. You can see Ben's, he's got his EG Civic, coming along. Hopefully we can get it out on the track pretty soon. Damon and his Fiat, always doing stuff with that. Thank you for watching, and we hope you tune in for the next video. See you later.